It's called The NeverEnding Story, so why would we ever stop thinking about it? Even decades later, this fantasy classic has so much to love.
From luck dragons to childlike empresses, they brought the world of Fantasia to life. Now, 40 years later, the cast of The NeverEnding Story looks nothing like what you might remember, and you won't be seeing a few of them on screen anytime soon. Barrett Oliver got his big Hollywood break playing the wonderfully curious scamp Bastian Bucks in The NeverEnding Story, but the former child star is nowhere near Hollywood today. Instead, Oliver is now a photographic historian who specializes in 19th century photographic technology. He literally wrote the book on the Woodbury-type printing process of that era. The NeverEnding Story wasn't Oliver's only foray into film. He went on to claim starring roles in Tim Burton's 1984 short film Frankenweenie, 1985's family sci-fi film Daryl, and Ron Howard's Cocoon. Oliver stepped away from the spotlight to pursue his more academic interests after 1989's Scenes from the Class Struggle in Beverly Hills. His experience appearing in front of the cameras has since come in handy though, since he starred in a 2012 short film about his craft called In the Usual Manner. Atreyu is something of a comeback kid in The NeverEnding Story. He endures the depressing death of his horse and still manages to battle back the forces of existential destruction.
When do I begin?
His real-life counterpart, Noah Hathaway, had already made something of a name for himself before he became the fabled hero of the movie. His prior credits included 1978's Battlestar Galactica and its TV follow-up, as well as appearances on a ton of then-popular shows like Mork and Mindy and Chips.
It's true. My dad was a hero before he died.
He quit the business after starring in 1986's Troll because, as he told the News Tribune, he wanted to live normally. After his career as a child star, Hathaway worked in finance and tattoo artistry. He decided to return to the business in 2012 when he landed a role in Sushi Girl. Hathaway's comeback didn't amount to many roles, but he did manage to reprise the one that made him famous. In 2016, he appeared in a Spotify commercial reprising his role from The NeverEnding Story.
I can't believe after all these years, people are still listening to this song!
The childlike empress might have relied on the boys in her life to give her a name, but Tammy Stronach has no such identity crisis. The actor had no screen experience to speak of when she nabbed the role.
Atreyu, why do you look so sad?
She explained to Slash Film that it was actually something of a fluke that she was offered the movie in the first place. Although she's had a few other credits since, Stronach's current occupation and passion is professional dancing. She studied dance in college and graduate school and now runs her own company in New York. Stronach's decision to pursue a mostly non-Hollywood life was intentional. She told Slash Film, "I really love dancing. I made a decision that I would throw myself into dance and that if I really missed acting, I would return to it as an adult when I was in charge of my life and I wasn't upsetting my parents, who both had really active full careers and couldn't just give over all their time to pursue being my manager." That's exactly what she did. Stronach ended up frequenting the stage for several years and helped develop the Paper Canoe Company, which performs across the country. In more recent years, she and her husband, Greg Steinbrunner, have tapped into the growing nostalgia surrounding The NeverEnding Story. The couple developed Man and Witch, The Dance of a Thousand Steps, a throwback fantasy film that features many popular 80s actors. Stronach told Deadline, "This film is full of nostalgia for fans of classic 80s fantasy." Deep Roy is one of those character actors who's appeared in dozens of movies and TV series, though most people didn't know his name for years. His career began in the 1970s, and he soon took on the role of Teeny Weeny in The NeverEnding Story.
We are on the same mission! After all, if the Empress can't save us, who could?
Roy has continued working in Hollywood since The NeverEnding Story, playing various characters on the sidelines or in the background, while also working as a stunt performer. Eventually, people started noticing the actor's talent regardless of whatever makeup or costume he found himself in, and he's become a well-known and sought-after character actor. Roy plays Keenser in the rebooted Star Trek franchise, but he is probably best known these days for portraying every Oompa Loompa in Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Gerald McRaney's turn as Bastian's dad in The NeverEnding Story was brief, but the actor has enjoyed a lot more screen time in his subsequent projects. McRaney had developed quite a small screen resume before landing the small supporting role in the movie, and he's since continued to thrive on television. Most notably, he starred in Simon & Simon for 8 seasons before becoming the titular father figure in the hit sitcom Major Dad. McRaney continued expanding his small screen stature by appearing in various high-profile programs. He earned a nomination from the Screen Actors Guild for his work on House of Cards and took home a Primetime Emmy Award for playing Dr. Nathan Kotowski on This Is Us.
And you thought I just delivered babies.
It was McRaney's first nomination, but he had presented at the Emmys before, so he was familiar with how it all worked. He told Gold Derby, "What I didn't expect was my wife's reaction to it. I've never seen anything like it. I refer to it as projectile crying." The voice actor responsible for most of the memorable non-human characters in the NeverEnding Story, including the Rockbiter, Falkor, and Gamork, was Alan Oppenheimer, who's had an illustrious career in front of the mic and the camera.
I like children.
His screen appearance credits include Hogan's Heroes, but his voice credits are far more numerous. He's perhaps best known for his work on Flash Gordon, Ghostbusters, The Legend of Prince Valiant, and The Transformers. One of his most recent roles was in 2022, when he voiced King Grayskull in 3 episodes of Netflix's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Based on the classic novel of the same name, The NeverEnding Story is treasured by young and old fans alike. Decades after its release, the film continues to resonate with audiences, but there's more to this timeless tale than you might realize. Here's the untold truth of The NeverEnding Story. Noah Hathaway brought an entire gamut of emotions to his portrayal of the young warrior Atreyu. From his intense vulnerability as he mourns the loss of his horse Artax to his fierceness in battle against the evil Gamork, it's hard to imagine the film with anyone but Hathaway in the role. However, his journey to being cast was nearly as arduous as his character's journey in the movie. Talking to Entertainment Weekly for the film's 35th anniversary, Hathaway revealed that he was among 50,000 hopefuls from around the world who auditioned for the part of the strong and sensitive Atreyu. When he was finally cast, the film's original director ended up leaving the project, opening the door for Wolfgang Petersen to take over, which meant that Hathaway had to begin the audition process all over again. In total, Hathaway recalls auditioning at least 10 times, but in the end, he survived the casting process and finally became Atreyu. While Hathaway began acting long before The NeverEnding Story, afterward he only had a few more on-screen appearances before mostly retiring. Hathaway has also worked as a tattoo artist, and of course, he was asked to do a lot of tattoos inspired by The NeverEnding Story. As if the scene with Atreyu and Artax in the Swamps of Sadness isn't traumatic enough, there was a horrible urban legend that the real horse didn't survive the film shoot.
What?
Don't worry, that story is completely untrue. After filming, the production even gave Hathaway one of the horses from the film, as well as the saddle for all his hard work. Unfortunately, it was too complicated to ship an animal internationally. Hathaway ended up giving the horse to his riding double. Luckily, the horse went on to live for another 20 years in Germany. Hathaway continues to joke that he feels responsible for so many people's childhood trauma because of that heartbreaking scene with Artax. Hathaway has also mentioned that he feels like he's giving fans a little therapy when he meets them at his convention appearances. While no horses were hurt during the many difficult days of shooting the movie, the same can't be said for Hathaway. Even before primary filming began, one of the horses fell on him and he ended up with a broken back. He was in traction for an entire month and they weren't sure if he would be healed in time to actually play Atreyu. After everything he'd been through to land the part, losing it before even beginning would have been heartbreaking. Luckily, Hathaway healed up quickly. Even though he would be injured a few more times while working on the set, in particular during the Swamps of Sadness scene when Atreyu is face-to-face with Morla, the Ancient One, those scenes took the production 2 grueling months to film and saw Hathaway constantly soaking wet and covered in muck for much of the time. Because of his initial accident with the horse, Hathaway has titanium screws in his spine and still has to deal with painful back issues. The NeverEnding Story is filled with fantastical characters who were brought to life using practical special effects and puppetry. And as hard as it is to conceive of the movie without Hathaway as Atreyu, it's almost weirder to find out that the voices of the kindly Falkor, the limestone-loving Rockbiter, and the menacing Gamork were all provided by the same person after primary filming was finished. Veteran character and voice actor Alan Oppenheimer, who was also featured in such iconic shows as He-Man, The Smurfs, and Transformers, was first approached by Petersen to do the voice of Falkor. Oppenheimer flew to Germany and did his work, but wasn't happy with his first attempt as the voice of the Luck Dragon. He went back for a second pass at Falkor, and in the process, Oppenheimer completely fell in love with the movie. Since Peterson had yet to find appropriate voices for the Rockbiter and Gamork, he had Oppenheimer give it a shot. The result was 3 distinct characters that you'd never guess were all voiced by the same person. On top of that, Oppenheimer also ended up performing the voice of the narrator. We can't help but wonder how Peterson was able to find one actor who could contribute so much to the film.
With luck.
Plenty of fans of the movie have imagined what it would be like to ride Falkor through the skies of Fantasia, or on Earth chasing down some bullies. But for Hathaway, the experience left something to be desired. Falkor was actually a huge contraption that, at times, was suspended 20 feet in the air and required a minimum of 15 people to operate. Hathaway told Entertainment Weekly, "Riding Falkor wasn't as glamorous as you might imagine. Sometimes it would overheat and it would start going out of control probably once every 20 minutes. It ended up being like riding a bucking bronco. I just had to hold on for dear life from time to time, but it was fun." In the same Entertainment Weekly interview, Peterson pinpointed a major reason the film still resonates so deeply even in the age of HD. "It took a lot of work to have it come out the way it did on film. And I believe that's what gives this movie such a great quality that can be appreciated after all these years. The creatures were so real how they had to interact with the actors. It wasn't like they were just standing in front of this green screen and pretending." And for those who still dream of riding Falkor, you can visit him at Bavaria Film Studios in Germany, where the actual luck dragon from the film is part of an exhibit that's open to the public. Even the most devoted NeverEnding Story fan might not know that there are essentially 2 different versions of the soundtrack out in the world. The German version was fully scored by Klaus Doldinger, but as Peterson considered his vision going international, he brought in songwriter and composer Giorgio Moroder to add some final flourishes to the score that North Americans are most familiar with. Another huge difference is that the German version of the movie doesn't have the famous earworm of a theme song, sung by pop star Lamar. The song ended up being a hit, but it almost wasn't included in the film because the then president of EMI Records absolutely hated it. However, because Moroder was so impressed with Lamar after meeting him, he showed support for the singer, and the tune ended up opening the movie in a huge way. The song had a major resurgence in 2019 when it was featured in an episode of Stranger Things. And after listening to Dusty, Bun, and Susie Poo duet the iconic tune over and over again, fans kept coming back to the same thought.
I want to hear it.
Not right now.
Yes, now, Dusty Bun.
Unlike many of its contemporaries, the NeverEnding Story has aged really well. One of the reasons is because Peterson was an absolute perfectionist, consistently requiring multiple takes in order to get every scene exactly right. Speaking to the News Tribune, Hathaway noted that a 3-month filming schedule ended up turning into a whole year because Peterson kept requiring take after take. However, eagle-eyed viewers of the film might notice that some of the actors in the English version appear to be dubbed. This is because many of them were German and didn't speak English at all. They read their lines in German, and American voice actors were brought in later to re-record English versions of their scenes. The terrifying threat to Fantasia, and the human world as well, was a dreadful void called the Nothing.
What is the Nothing?
Well, according to Gamork, the Nothing is an emptiness or despair fueled by the loss of hopes and dreams. The Nothing was an esoteric threat, but also very real in the world of the NeverEnding Story. Talking to Sci-Fi Now, the movie's special effects coordinator Brian Johnson explained that he conceptualized the Nothing in the movie by essentially using the horizon as a starting point, then showing the natural world disintegrating and disappearing into it. This was one of the few moments when camera tricks were utilized. The Nothing's unique effects are depicted as colors splashed across the sky, while the illusion of nothingness takes center stage. Peterson was no stranger to critically acclaimed films. However, he wasn't familiar with making an English-language movie that would connect with English-speaking audiences. Through his film Das Boot, Peterson became friends with Steven Spielberg, and they often chatted about filmmaking over the phone. When Spielberg was in the early stages of planning Schindler's List, Peterson helped him scout different locations for filming. In return, Spielberg was more than happy to take a look at Peterson's working version of the NeverEnding Story, and he helped cut some footage that he felt would pace the movie better for international audiences, in particular North Americans. Peterson has said that Spielberg admitted he learned those tips from George Lucas, who helped him develop his own sense of pacing. Because of Spielberg's edits, the American version of the movie is 7 minutes shorter than the German one. As thanks for his notes and kindness, Peterson gave Spielberg one of the most coveted props from the film, the Orin necklace that Atreyu wears. Spielberg still has the Orin to this day. Mikhail Enda's The NeverEnding Story was a global bestseller after its 1979 publication. When the book's rights were sold for the film adaptation, Peterson was supposed to write the script with Enda himself, but this is where problems with the production began. Enda didn't understand why his enormous story would need to be altered in order to fit a 2-hour running time. Peterson said the story was so sacred to Enda that it made collaborating with him extremely difficult, so Peterson ended up co-writing the script with Herman Weigel instead. When Peterson sent over the final draft, Enda was so furious at how it turned out that he tried to sue to have production stopped. The movie came out anyway, and unsurprisingly, Enda hated it. In fact, he had some especially scathing things to say about the first gate that Atreyu passed on his way to the Southern Oracle. The Sphinxes are quite one of the biggest embarrassments of the film. They are full-bosomed strippers who sit there in the desert. Enda also called the film disgusting, and even went so far as to accuse the production of ruining his story just for the money, claiming they didn't understand the core themes of the book. Because of Enda's absolute hatred of the movie, Peterson said that the rights to the story are tied up in litigation with no end in sight. Basically, don't expect a remake anytime soon. Peterson is completely okay with that, and the film he directed. He told Entertainment Weekly, "It is my understanding that some films you should leave alone, and that's how I feel about this film. I like the way the film is, with all its old-fashioned charm." Another person who has some thoughts on the possibility of a remake is the childlike Empress herself, Tammy Stronach. While Stronach has admitted she would enjoy watching a remake, she also had a very positive perspective on the message of the existing movie. "I think the film is an invitation to grow the space of making and creating. Hopefully, if Hollywood diversifies and there are more women directors and more minorities writing scripts, the message of the film will be the ultimate winner here. So I don't think we need to remake this, but I think we need to keep growing the space for everyone." Ultimately, a remake seems unnecessary since the original film has more than stood the test of time. And if fans truly want to experience more of Fantasia, they can take Bastian's lead, find a secluded spot, and read the original NeverEnding Story.
The NeverEnding Story takes the tried and true formula of the hero's journey and gives it an interesting narrative twist by doubling up on protagonists. Atreyu is tasked with finding a cure for the childlike Empress, whose deathly illness threatens the fabric of Fantasia, while a dark force called the Nothing eats everything in its path. From the Ivory Tower to the Swamps of Sadness, the Southern Oracle, and the ends of Fantasia itself, Atreyu searches for a cure at great personal loss. He loses his horse and his best friend Artax, which threatens the courage and resolve that got him on this journey in the first place. Fortunately, he makes a new friend in Luck Dragon Falkor, who helps him get back on track. At the first gate of the Southern Oracle, Atreyu faces another test. This time, he must confront his own sense of self-worth, proving he believes in himself. He then has to confront the vision of his true self in a mousy little boy named Bastian, who is reading a book far, far away. Part of Atreyu's journey is complete when he learns the childlike Empress needs a new name, and only a human child can bestow it. But there are more setbacks in store. Atreyu loses Falkor and his magical talisman and is forced to confront the Nothing's minion with nothing but his own wits and strength. Meanwhile, Bastian has his own part to play in the NeverEnding Story. At first, it seems like a simple framing sequence, with Bastian reading a storybook about the events unfolding for Atreyu and Fantasia. He's grieving the loss of a mother who seemed to support her son's sensitivity and daydreaming, and his escape into flights of fancy are his coping method. When Atreyu loses Artax, Bastian weeps along with him, because he has felt that loss himself.
My horse died. I nearly drowned. I just barely got away from the Nothing.
As he reads, Bastian realizes that he might be the most important hero of them all. And to honor his cherished mother and her memory, he even gives her name to the childlike Empress, saving her and Fantasia. If it seems silly that a new name might save someone's life, then you haven't considered the power of what we call things. Bastian is called terrible names by the school bullies, which certainly affects how he feels and sees himself. With the arrival of the Nothing, the childlike Empress also loses an aspect of herself that must be reinvented. Her new name is a new start, not just for the Empress, but for her whole world. As Bastian makes his wishes, he ensures that all the friendships made before the Nothing's rampage remained intact. He ultimately gets to experience a ride on Falkor firsthand, and even gives his bullies a taste of their own terrible medicine. As the Nothing sweeps across Fantasia, a ragtag bunch meets in the howling forest on their way to the Ivory Tower. The Rockbiter, the Nighthawk and his stupid bat, as well as Teeny Weeny and his racing snail. They are all members of different Fantasian groups with the same mission of beseeching the childlike Empress for help restoring their lands. This unlikely group quickly becomes friends as they realize how each can help the others. The Nighthawk is able to fly to the top of the Ivory Tower and hear the news. The Rockbiter offers all the little ones protection, and the racing snail is here to shatter preconceived notions of what certain kinds of creatures can do. What bonds them is the shared loss of their ancestral lands through the power of dark forces, which brings a theme of colonization into the NeverEnding Story's mix and leads to a very grim moment when the Nothing snatches the Rockbiter's friends right from under him.
They look like big, good, strong hands, don't they?
The Rockbiter gives up hope and allows the Nothing to take him, but because of Bastion's clever wishes, he and his comrades are eventually reunited and continued their shared friendship through the collective trauma they all survived. One of the most satisfying things about a fairy tale like the NeverEnding Story is how far into destruction we travel before the world is restored to rights. The Nothing destroys all of Fantasia except for a single grain of sand before Bastion heals the Empress with her new name. The forces of darkness are defeated, but there is still work to do to properly restore all that's been damaged. Bastion has a huge job ahead of him now that he's no longer just an armchair hero. And when the Empress grants Bastion all the wishes he needs to recreate Fantasia, it's a victory against hopelessness. When we see Fantasia rebuilt in a new form of glory, it reminds us that maintaining hope in even the bleakest of circumstances is a life-affirming act, and one we should strive to cultivate as Bastion does. Falkor might be the single most beloved character in the NeverEnding Story. Between his hearty chuckle and his friendly canine features, Falkor is a reminder that we must always fight against the kind of hopelessness embodied by the Nothing. While many times luck is actually a product of good circumstances, timing, and privilege, the luck symbolized by Falkor is about the faith that goodness and good people will ultimately prevail. Even when Atreyu is convinced that he failed to find the human child who could give the Empress a new name, Falkor comforts him and reminds him that he did his very best. And that kind reminder is what draws viewers to the Luck Dragon. In a scene that has been traumatizing children alike for decades, Atreyu loses his beloved horse in the swamps of sadness. Even today, people who have seen the NeverEnding Story 100 times know it is the most brutal scene in the film, and some will even leave the room to avoid shedding tears. Looking at the big picture, though, the terrible events in the swamps of sadness are a perfect metaphor for grief, loss, and childhood trauma. This is probably why adults still have a visceral reaction to the incident even years later, because we remember being Atreyu's age and having to navigate our own losses in different ways. What ends up being beautiful about this painful scene is how it shows us that even a warrior isn't immune to grief. For Bastion, the moment allows him to feel his own grief and begin to process the trauma of losing his mother, and teaches him one of the movie's lessons.
It has to hurt if it's to heal.
Avoidance doesn't make wounds go away, and pain has the power to remind us we are still alive and healing. Sometimes people become more cynical as they get older, and this can quickly turn into bitterness and resentment. It certainly does with Bastion's father, who is all business and can't understand why his son can't move on from his mother's death as quickly. He sees Bastion's sensitivity as weakness, and so does the Nothing.
Because people who have no hopes are easy to control.
This is a scarily true statement in our own human world, where every day people lose hope and turn to all kinds of ways not to care about others. Morla the Ancient One embodies this despair, constantly saying that nothing matters, echoing the apathy and cynicism that we often see in adults. Atreyu and Bastion, however, both refuse to accept these supposedly grown-up truths. One of the NeverEnding Story's most important messages is having faith in the competence of children. Just because someone is young doesn't make them incapable of great feats.
He simply can't imagine that one little boy could be that important.
Sadly, Bastion has been bullied for the traits that make him the ideal child to help save Fantasia, so he has no idea how much power he holds in his heart and imagination. When he learns his own strength, though, it's a lesson he'll hopefully never forget. The NeverEnding Story is packed full of important themes and messages, but one of the most fundamental is about the dangers of bullying, including the way that parents treat their children. The bullying that Bastian deals with from his classmates is awful and humiliating. The quiet bullying he endures from his father is far more insidious than being tossed into a dumpster by his classmates. He berates his son for his keen imagination and the way he expresses himself in ways that are all healthy coping mechanisms for a child grieving the recent loss of his mother. This is one of the more painful aspects of the film, and explains why Bastian wouldn't want to come back to Earth so quickly once he finally visits Fantasia. Many kids who are sensitive and imaginative find sanctuary in books and stories on their best days. On a bad day, however, like the one that sees Bastian bullied by both his father and the regular trio of tormentors at school, a book is an even more valuable tool of escape. He simply cannot deal with the real world, and the only thing that makes sense to him is digging into a book he's never read before. There's an almost religious kind of sanctuary in the way the film presents the act of reading, and there's more to it than just escapism. As the bookseller, Mr. Coriander, says, a safe book allows you to return to yourself unscathed by the end. But a dangerous book will change you, and fundamentally change how you see and experience the world. The NeverEnding Story also introduces young audiences to the notion of metatextuality, stories within stories.
Just as he is sharing all your adventures, others are sharing his.
This narrative trick can draw readers and viewers even deeper into a story by making us a part of it, and that's a huge reason why the NeverEnding Story still resonates with audiences today. As a film, the NeverEnding Story focuses on adapting the first half of Mikhail Enda's beautiful book about how a little boy saves the world through reading. The NeverEnding Story 2, the next chapter, was released in 1990 with an entirely new cast, except for grouchy bookstore owner Carl Conrad Coriander. In this sequel, Bastian is trying to get over his fear of heights, which he does not have when he's riding on the back of a luck dragon. When the Orin, the mystical talisman carried by Atreyu, calls to him, he returns to Fantasia where a new evil, the emptiness, is being fueled by a sorceress. She tricks Bastian into making wishes, all the while stealing his memories of Earth and home. 1994's The NeverEnding Story 3 diverges completely from Enda's book and returns with yet another new cast. This time Bastian battles the Nasty, played by Jack Black in one of his first major roles, and reunites with many characters from the original film. When Atreyu reaches the boundaries of Fantasia, he finds a temple in ruins with elaborate paintings. He's shocked to see the paintings are of him and everything he survived. The NeverEnding Story suggests that Atreyu's journey, like the classic hero's journey structure that it follows, has happened many times before, and will probably happen again. This cycle of life and destruction and life emerging again is, in fact, a never-ending story. But more than that, the fight against apathy and hopelessness, and replacing them with hope and faith, is a story without an ending too. Like the symbol of two snakes entwined, eating their own tails, these important themes from the story continue to be relevant in the human world. The fact that after so many decades, people still watch, engage with, and adore the NeverEnding Story is simply a testament to the everlasting power of this triumphant tale.
The NeverEnding Story gave a generation a world of dreams and imagination, but unfortunately, some stories do have an end. These actors from the films are sadly no longer with us. The wonderful adventures in The NeverEnding Story wouldn't have even begun if Bastian hadn't stumbled into the bookstore owned by cranky Carl Conrad Coriander, portrayed by Thomas Hill.
The video arcade is down the street. Here we just sell small rectangular objects. They're called books.
Over the years, Hill played a wide range of characters in many television series and films, most notably the recurring role of Jim Dixon in the classic CBS sitcom Newhart. However, he returned to the role of the ornery bookseller he had created 6 years prior in 1990's The NeverEnding Story 2, The Next Chapter. On April 20, 2009, the 81-year-old actor died from a heart attack, but he will always be remembered as the gruff old man who inspired a world of children to crack open a book. Moses Gunn memorably portrayed the herald of the childlike empress who sends Atreyu on his quest to save Fantasia.
Is there any chance of success?
I do not know.
Aside from The NeverEnding Story, Gunn featured in a number of prominent roles in film and television, including Shaft's arch-nemesis Bumpy Jonas in Shaft and Shaft's Big Score. He was also nominated for an Emmy for his portrayal of Kintango in ABC's 1977 miniseries Roots. His success wasn't just limited to the screen either. For his stage work, he won an Obie Award in 1968 for playing Aaron in Titus Andronicus, and he was nominated for a Tony in 1976 for portraying Benjamin Hurspool in The Poison Tree. On December 16, 1993, the 64-year-old actor died from asthma complications, leaving behind a wealth of treasured performances. Played by Patricia Hayes, Urgel is a gnome who spends most of her time making gross broths and bickering with her husband, Engelwook.
Now it's my turn with him. Oh, no, you don't. I decide when he's well. It's your turn when I say it's your turn.
Appearing in films and television since 1936, Hayes accrued over 130 acting credits to her name, including roles in the fantasy film Willow and the comedy classic A Fish Called Wanda. She also appeared in television classics like BBC's The Benny Hill Show, Till Death Us Do Part, and Spooner's Patch. Her role in a 1971 episode of the BBC anthology series Play for Today snagged her a BAFTA win. On September 19, 1998, Hayes died due to natural causes at the age of 88. Sidney Bromley gave a memorable performance as Engelwook in The NeverEnding Story, imbuing the scientist gnome with the perfect balance of comedic chaos and dramatic gravitas. The character's knowledge of the Southern Oracle helps Atreyu further along on his quest to save the Empress.
Have you ever been to the Southern Oracle?
What do you think?
Throughout a career that spanned over 50 years, Bromley found himself in roles that were just as fantastical and adventurous. He was also in other fantasy classics like the 1981 epic Dragon Slayer and 1986's Pirates. On August 14, 1987, Bromley died at the age of 78, but his work will be remembered as a gateway to adventure for many. Played by Tilo Bruckner, the Night Hob is one of the first fantastical creatures we meet in the NeverEnding Story.
Is he a nutcase? No, he's a rock biter. A rock biter!
While internationally, Bruckner is most likely known for playing the Night Hob. He has acted in over 200 German films and television series dating from 1967 all the way through 2021. He also wrote and published his only novel in 2013, which told the story of a doctor in a failing relationship. On July 2, 2020, Bruckner died of heart failure at the age of 79, ending a truly remarkable career. Perhaps the most emotionally devastating scene in the NeverEnding Story, or any movie for that matter, is when Atreyu's horse Artax succumbs to despair and drowns in the swamp of sadness.
Artax! Fight against the sadness, Artax!
The scene is so powerful and convincing that it led to a persistent rumor that the filmmakers actually drowned the horse on set, which isn't true. In actuality, two horses were trained to go up to their necks in water and were frequently swapped out while filming to not overwhelm them. The horses were never fully submerged, as is evident in the finished film. After filming was complete, one of the horses was gifted to the actor playing Atreyu, Noah Hathaway. However, due to how complicated it would be to ship to his home, Hathaway decided to leave the horse in Germany with his stunt riding double. The horse lived on his ranch for the next 20 years or so before passing. Released 6 years after the 1984 original, The NeverEnding Story 2: The Next Chapter was in need of a younger actor to play Bastian, the role originally portrayed by Barrett Oliver. Jonathan Brandis stepped in to fill the role and told the story of Bastian returning to again save Fantasia.
Is there no one with the courage to stand up with me against the giants?
Prior to the sequel, Brandis had mostly appeared in small television roles. Afterward, he quickly found himself in a ton of higher-profile roles throughout the early 90s. Those included Stephen King's It, Rodney Dangerfield's 1992 sports comedy Ladybugs, and the 1992 Chuck Norris karate comedy Sidekicks. But he truly became a certified teen idol when he was cast as the scientific genius Lucas in NBC's sci-fi action series Sequest DSV. Tragically, on November 12, 2003, Brandis died by suicide at the age of 27. Freddie Jones does double duty in The NeverEnding Story 3, playing the Old Man of Wandering Mountain as well as taking over the role of Mr. Coriander. The Old Man of Wandering Mountain was the author of The NeverEnding Story in the original novel, but here he functions more as its protector, as the book basically writes itself. That is, until some bullies steal the book from Coriander's library and start writing a new future. Throughout his nearly 60-year career, Jones appeared in over 200 film and television projects. These included big films like 1983's Krull, 1985's Young Sherlock Holmes, and 2002's The Count of Monte Cristo. He also featured in 3 David Lynch films, Dune, The Elephant Man, and Wild at Heart. His final role was a 13-year run as Sandy Thomas on the ITV soap opera Emmerdale. On July 9, 2019, Jones died at the age of 91, leaving behind a wife and 3 sons, including Harry Potter and Marvel alum Toby Jones. Falkor the Luck Dragon was voiced by a different actor in all 3 films. In The NeverEnding Story 3, the fluffy and lovable character was voiced by fan convention mainstay William Hootkins.
Oh no, I'm losing altitude! Look out below!
Hootkins appeared in over 100 projects, including 1981's Raiders of the Lost Ark and 1989's Batman. But he was probably best recognized for flying his X-Wing in the Battle of Yavin under the callsign Red 6 in the 1977 classic Star Wars. That's right, Hootkins was the fan-favorite rebel pilot Jack Tono Porkins. On October 23, 2005, Hootkins died of pancreatic cancer at the age of 57. In the NeverEnding Story 3, Fantasia is threatened by a group of bullies calling themselves the Nasties. Each Nasty has their role in the group, and the muscle was provided by Rage, beefily portrayed by Adrian Dorval. Over the years, Dorval contributed his talents to a wide range of popular television series, usually in small parts. That includes MacGyver, Highlander, the 2004 Battlestar Galactica, Stargate SG-1, and more. On the feature film side, he popped up in Shanghai Noon and The Chronicles of Riddick, to name a few. On January 5, 2021, Dorval died from cancer at the age of 57. In the NeverEnding Story 3, the childlike Empress and the Old Man of Wandering Mountain are assisted in their quest to Fantasia by a character known only as Large Head.
I was able to butt us through to the secret tunnels for our escape.
Well, that's using your head.
For the 9 days actor Thomas Petrou was on set, he would spend over 4 hours in makeup each morning to achieve the bulbous-headed look of the character. While he has a few other on-screen credits to his name, Petrou put a much larger stamp on the world of voice acting. Specifically, he dubbed over 2,000 films into his native German. Notable instances include providing the voice for Biff Tannen in all of the Back to the Future films, dubbing over Gary Oldman in 4 separate films, and voicing Sheldon Plankton in the Nickelodeon television series SpongeBob SquarePants.
Vielleicht hast du recht. Manchmal bin ich ein richtiger Vollidiot. Ich befehle dir, mir dabei zu helfen, netter zu werden!
On April 13, 2018, Petrou died at the age of 61, leaving behind a lifetime of voices. At the beginning of the first NeverEnding Story, Bastian finds himself on the run from a handful of bullies. Just before he makes it to the bookstore, Bastian ducks past 2 men on the sidewalk, causing one of them to drop a bottle of milk. It's actually a sneaky cameo. The guy who drops the milk is played by the film's director Wolfgang Petersen, who went on to direct films like Air Force One, The Perfect Storm, and Troy. The man next to him is Bernd Eichinger, the producer of the NeverEnding Story. Eichinger produced a wide range of films, including 4 Resident Evil films, the first 2 Fantastic Four films, and the Sean Connery-Christian Slater film The Name of the Rose. In addition to producing, he was also an accomplished screenwriter, having written 2006's Perfume, the story of a murderer, about a scent-obsessed serial killer, and 2004's Downfall, about the rise and fall of Hitler. The latter received an Oscar nomination and thousands of re-subtitled Hitler Rant parodies. Tragically, they both passed. At the age of 61, after having worked on nearly 100 films, Eichinger died of a heart attack on January 24, 2011. Petersen died on August 12, 2022 from pancreatic cancer. He was 81.